Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Development Standards Committee, 14th November here at County Hall. Can I just remind everyone present and online that this meeting is being recorded and is also being broadcast live on the Angus Council YouTube channel. So can I remind all those joining us remotely to turn their microphones to mute unless they wish to speak, and they should do so by raising their hands remotely. First of all, can I ask for any apologies for absence?
Yes, Convener, apologies from Councillors Fairweather and Stewart.
That's fine, thank you. And for declarations of interest from any elected members? Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I have a declaration of interest to make on items 6 and 7, reports 313/23 and 314/23 respectively, concerning Mulrowney. I do know the applicant's family quite well. In the past, on previous applications, I've made a statement of transparency. In these particular applications, though, I also know many of the objectors. Some of them are personal friends of long standing. And whilst I'm confident I could make an impartial decision on these matters, I'm not confident that a member of the public might see it that way, and they might reasonably question my impartiality. So for those reasons, I'm going to recuse myself for these items. I won't take part in debate or voting. Thank you.
Okay, understood. Councillor Brays, thank you very much. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. Again, items 6 and 7, I know of the family. I'm not friends with them, but they are my constituents, and it's just I will be staying in the meeting, and it's just a transparency that was put forward. Thank you.
That's fine, Councillor Nicholl. Okay, there's no one else. Oh, Councillor Gall, I see on remote. Councillor Gall, you conflict of interest or declaration of interest?
Thank you, Convener. It's just to echo exactly what Councillor Brays has said. I know the family and I know several of the objectors, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to stay in on these items. So following Councillor Brays, I will remove myself as well from the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gall. Other than that, I myself will provide a statement of transparency. I'm a patient of the dental practice referred to in agenda item 8, and that's my only involvement, and as such I will remain in the chamber and take part during any discussions and voting on the said agenda item. Right, thank you everyone. Agenda item 3 is building warrants, and this committee is asked to note that during the period the 7th of October 2023 to 3rd November, a total of 49 building warrants, 3 demolition warrants and 17 amendment to warrants have been approved with an estimated cost of £3,453,472. A copy of the approved warrants have been already sent to every elected member. So is that noted? Thank you. Agenda item 4, delegated decisions. Again, the committee is asked to note during the same period to 3rd November 2023, a total of 43 applications have been approved and 1 refused under the Planning Acts through the scheme of delegation to officers. And again, a copy of the delegated applications have been sent to every member. Again, is that noted? Thank you. Agenda item 5 is the minute of our previous meeting. That is the minute of meeting of committee held on the 17th of October of this year. Are there any comments or adjustments? Councillor Clark.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Convener. It can't be adjusted, but I would comment that I'm not listed as an apology because it became too late, but I did actually give my apology. It's important to me that I say that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. I did actually note that previously and bring that up, but we will make sure it's noted in the minutes of this meeting. So other than that, are the minutes approved? Thank you. apologies. I'll just go back very quickly with that. Agenda items 6 and 7 are linked, as I've mentioned, and they both relate to planning applications Brownie Farm in Menmuir. As I've asked the officers to present their slides and reports on both applications as they're linked. However, each planning application will be debated and voted on in turn. So can we start, Mr. Taylor, with asking you to present the slides, please?
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, members. So the applications we're considering first relate to development at Balrownie Farm, Menmuir by Brechin. Item 6, as you have introduced, relates to an application for the erection of a general purpose agricultural building and associated concrete hardstanding. Excuse me. Item 7 is a retrospective application, and that application relates to the installation of replacement grain drying equipment at the site. So Balrownie Farm is located in the position of approximately where the blue arrow shows to the top left of the slide. Balrownie Farm is around about 4 kilometres to the north of Brechin and around about 2.2 kilometres north of Little Brechin. Balrownie Farm is, amongst other things, engaged in the growing, drying, storage and transport of barley, which is ultimately used for malt whisky production purposes down at Baird's Malt in Arbroath. But information submitted in support of the application indicates Balrownie uses fields within a 20-mile radius of the farm complex to grow grain. Grain is grown on those fields. It's brought to the site during the harvest season. It's dried on site. Around about 60% of the grain that's harvested is stored on site, and around about 40% of the grain that's produced and dried is then transported to satellite locations for storage. Those locations, it's understood, are at Purton or Stracathro. So the applicant is suggesting that the new agricultural shed is required to consolidate their storage operation. So all of the grain is currently grown and brought to Balrownie. Some of the grain is stored off-site, and the application before us would result in all of the grain produced by Balrownie stored within the site. And the applicants indicated that that would improve their business efficiency and, in general terms, would reduce the overall number of miles required in terms of the production of barley, the drying, and then ultimately transporting it to Arbroath. It would reduce the overall number of miles that the food would travel, which is fairly consistent with MPF4 in terms of carbon reduction targets. But in terms of the development plan position, both MPF4 and the Angus Local Development Plan are supportive of rural economic activity, including agricultural development, where identified impacts can be mitigated. So this is a site plan which shows the position of the proposed new shed in respect of its relationship with the existing farm building complex at Balrownie. So we have Balrownie Farmhouse to the southeast, which is a Category C listed building. It has to its rear and its west side existing farm buildings, and the proposed new shed will be located on the edge of the existing farm building group on the west side. The new building would be around about 4,000 square metres in footprint, so it is large, but the proposed building is of a relatively similar scale to the existing building, which is to the immediate east of where the building is proposed. The new building would also have an associated concrete hardstanding area formed on its east side and its south side, and the applicant has proposed new tree planting on the north side and west side of the site, just to help in the longer term to try and soften the impact of that development. And there is some fairly mature planting on the east side of the group, so that would be a biodiversity enhancement measure, having new tree planting in that location. The second aspect of development we're looking at today is a proposal for a replacement grain drying apparatus. And the blue arrow shown just in this location is the approximate position of that apparatus. It's contained within an 80 square metre building, and it directly adjoins and is attached to an existing agricultural shed. It is a fairly tall structure, but would be seen in the context of tall agricultural shed and finished in similar materials. So in terms of the new shed that we're looking at and the grain drying apparatus, they are considered to be fairly logical locations to extend the building group. There's operational reasons for needing the development in that location. The closest residential receptor to the site is Balranny Farmhouse. I've already touched upon that. That is a Category C listed building, but impacts on its setting are not considered to be significant, having regard to the orientation of the listed building, the distance between the development and the listed building and intervening development. Historic Environment Scotland has been consulted on the application in terms of impacts on scheduled monuments in the surrounding area, and they have indicated that they do not consider this proposal would result in any significant impacts on surrounding scheduled monuments, and that relates to both the grain drying apparatus and the agricultural shed. It's also worth noting at this juncture that the closest unconnected house to the development is around 460 metres to the south of the proposed agricultural shed. That's at Hill Terrace in the settlement, or the hamlet, if you like, of Balranny, which is sorry in great detail, but it's just to the south, around about 460 metres to the south of the agricultural farm building complex. So elevations of the proposed shed, it is a fairly substantial structure. It's, I think, 20 metres approximately to its maximum ridge height and around about 11 metres to the eaves. It is covering an area of around about 4,000 square metres, so that is a significant size of structure. However, when seen against existing buildings of a fairly similar scale, it's considered that that could be accommodated in the landscape without any significant or unacceptable landscape or visual impacts. You'll just note in the central slide or the central image, the building would be cut into the slope by approximately 3 metres, which would help it sit down within the slope. And the following slide will show that that ties in, roughly speaking, with the ridge height, wall head height of the adjacent agricultural building. So we have the existing shed, which is at Balranny, shown on the right-hand side, and the proposed new shed shown on the left-hand side, and that just shows they're fairly comparable in terms of scale. Moving on to the grain drying apparatus, so that is retrospective, that part of the proposal, that's already in situ. The existing agricultural shed to the east of the one which we're considering is shown here, and the grain drying apparatus is situated adjacent to its northern gable. So it is a fairly tall structure, around about 20 metres high, but as you can see from the middle left image, when seen against the gable of the existing agricultural shed, impacts associated with that in terms of landscape and visual impacts aren't significant. Again, very much a logical type of apparatus. One of the concerns raised in representations relating to grain drying equipment relates to noise. The application before us is to replace older grain drying equipment at the site, which is understood has now been mothballed. But the applicants indicated that this new equipment which has been installed is quicker. It dries grain, the new equipment is quieter, it dries grain more quickly, and it uses around about 40% less energy. So it's more efficient for the applicant. And in terms of noise impacts, which you would expect during the harvest season in an agricultural location, it's understood that the development would result in a less duration of impact in terms of the length of time it takes to dry grain, and the actual apparatus itself is quieter. Colleagues in environmental health have considered noise impacts associated with the proposal, and they are satisfied, having reviewed the technical information, that those impacts would not be significant or unacceptable, and planning conditions are proposed to introduce noise limits which would regulate impacts associated with noise from that apparatus. So both applications have attracted a fairly significant level of objection, raising concerns relating to HGV movements. And those representations are both from members of the public and from Inverest Community Council, and also from Brecon Community Council. So we have gone back to the applicant and we have asked for more comprehensive information which look at vehicle movements associated with the development. But the information we have received from the applicant in the form of a transport statement indicates that this development actually would not result in an increase in HGV movements, because, as I tried to introduce earlier, all of the grain which is grown is already dried at Balranny. So instead of having to move that grain off-site to satellite storage, it would all be kept on-site, and that grain would then eventually be taken to Arbroath in the period between February and August the following year. So what it would do is reduce the intensity of vehicle movements, HGV movements, during the harvest season, but overall it shouldn't result in any increase in HGV movements on the wider public road network. The transport statement submitted indicates there has been no evidence of accidents in the past 5 years on this road network, and their conclusion is that there is no additional safety measures required to accommodate the proposed development. The applicants also clarified that his drivers operate to a strict protocol to drive in a courteous fashion. They have indicated that vehicles are fitted with trackers and cameras, and therefore, if there were any complaints about driver behaviour, they're in a position to investigate those complaints and deal with any concerns that might be raised about speeding and road position, that type of thing. But obviously, it's not a matter for the planning system to regulate speeding, and the applicant has indicated that they have a strict protocol in place to avoid that being an issue. Colleagues in the road service have reviewed the transport statement that the applicant has prepared. They have indicated they are satisfied with the methodology used by the consultant, and they consider the findings to be acceptable, have no objection to the application. Roads colleagues have indicated that this is a C-class road, and available information suggests that it does operate well within its notional capacity. So I just have a few photographs of the site now. This is taken from the access track looking in a easterly direction towards the existing shed. You can see adjacent to the shed is a grain drying facility that we're considering in item 7. The proposed new agricultural building will be sited on the agricultural land directly adjacent to that existing shed, but it will be of a very similar scale. It will be finished in external materials to tie in to the finish of that existing building. This is taken from the south looking north, so again, existing shed, proposed grain drying apparatus, and the area of agricultural land in the foreground on the left-hand side is the location where the proposed new agricultural building will be sited. And again, looking from the north in the southerly direction, the grain drying apparatus on the left, the position of the new building would just be on the right-hand side. So it is very much a logical location. The site does slope from north to south, but the building will be cut into the slope, which is recognised as a means to help reduce the significance of landscape and visual impacts. In terms of government guidance on the siting and design of agricultural buildings, siting the building next to existing buildings is good practice, as particularly in circumstances where there's a building of a fairly similar scale directly adjacent. So representations raise concerns about landscape and visual impacts. But this image is taken, it's a street view image taken from the hamlet of Ballarownie. So it's useful in two ways. It shows us that the existing large agricultural building on the site benefits from a landscape backcloth in terms of rising land to the north. The new building will be directly adjacent in this area. And it also gives us just a general impression of the nature of rural roads in the area. So they are of a mixed character, typical of rural roads used by agricultural traffic. There are areas where the road is narrower, wider. There are areas where it's 2 lanes. There are narrow, twisty sections. But the available information and the advice from our expert advisors in the road service indicate that there should be no unacceptable impacts on the road network, and the development would not result in an increase in HGV movements. I think this is my final photograph. This is taken looking from adjacent to the site entrance. Again, it gives you an impression of the nature of rural roads that serve the development. The existing agricultural building on the left-hand side and the grain drying apparatus is also shown here. So just to conclude on the 2 separate items, item 6, 22-00807, that is the application for the general purpose agricultural shed. There are 34 letters raising concerns relating to this, and those are dealt in detail in the report before members. As I've already touched upon, there are also comments received from community councils in Inveresk and Brechin. Again, matters raised by those parties are addressed in the report. The applicants indicated that the new shed would remove the requirement to store barley processed at Ballarownie elsewhere. It would consolidate storage operations and would not increase HGV movements. The proposal is considered to comply with development plan policy. Conditions are proposed to regulate impact. On that basis, that application is recommended for conditional approval. And item 7, which relates to the erection of replacement grain drying equipment, that has attracted 6 representations raising concerns, again dealt with in some detail. Consultees advise that impacts associated with noise can be mitigated, and conditions are proposed to deal with that. Information suggests the new apparatus is more efficient, it would dry the grain more quickly, and it will be quieter. That proposal, again, having regard to available information and consultee advice, is considered to comply with development plan policy. Conditions are proposed to regulate noise impacts, and again, that application is recommended for conditional approval.
Thanks, Mr Taylor. Can I just ask elected members if they have any questions for Mr Taylor initially on agenda item 6 at this point? Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Convener. No, it's just a quick question. Quite a few objectors mentioned that this is now on an industrial scale rather than an agricultural scale. Is there a defined limit between one and the other? Because to my mind, they're essentially the same.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of agricultural activities is they are kind of industrial in nature, and you know, the character of larger scale agricultural buildings, which are fairly common throughout the sort of Strathmore Valley, is they are more of an industrial nature. This is the sort of food production process that takes place in rural Angus, but nothing untypical at this site relative to what happens in the surrounding rural environment.
Councillor Dorn.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, a number of the letters and the Community Council asked the transport and environmental impact assessment, and I just wondered if you could give an answer specifically around that in the context of this proposal. Thank you.
So the application has been screened against the environmental impact assessment regulations. It's not the type of development that you would typically expect to see an environmental impact assessment for, and the screening process concluded that it didn't require environmental impact assessment. Additional information from the applicant to deal with the main environmental impact, which is raised in public comments, and that relates to issues around about transport and HGV movements, and the applicant has agreed to engage a transport consultant to look into that matter and has provided us with sufficient information which we consider on which to base an appropriate decision.
Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, I mean, I guess I think I've understood the transport arguments, the HGV movement. So effectively, maybe just getting our roads colleagues to agree with my understanding. What we're saying is there will be no additional HGV movements. They're consolidating drying and storage at one location. Well, previously they were drying it at Balrownie and then taking it to Pert or Stracathro to store, and these would be effectively additional HGV journeys, and ultimately the end destination is Arbroath, irrespective of where it's come from. So if you look at the overall net HGV movements, they should be reduced. Is that a correct summary? That's my question.
I think that's a reasonable summary, Councillor.
Okay, I can't see any other hands up. We have 2 or 3 speakers today. Under Standing Order 13 of Angus Council, applicants, supporters and objectors are given the opportunity to address any points which they wish the committee to take into account in coming to its decision today. Speakers will be given 5 minutes only, and I'd remind speakers that members of this committee have already been provided with the opportunity to read all the submissions and your concerns, and thus may already be familiar with most of the points that will be raised by speakers. Mr Carnegie Arbuthnot, I think, is the first speaker. If you'd care to use this microphone nearest to you. Mr Carnegie Arbuthnot, if you could speak quite close to the microphone so everyone can pick up, please, what you're saying, and when you've done 4 minutes, I'll give you a 1 minute reminder that you have a minute left. Is that okay?
Okay, I don't think I'll get that far.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Convener, for giving me the opportunity to make a representation. My name is James Carnegie Arbuthnot. I am a neighbour of the subjects of this application, and my family farms land adjacent to Balrownie. I am objecting to the application. I am surprised that the planning officers have recommended approval of this application, as it is contrary to Angus Council's planning policies. I have objected on the grounds that the proposed use is industrial, not agricultural, the detrimental impact on the amenities of the area, and the very high number of heavy vehicle movements which will be generated.
The grain drying and storage capacity of the farm already far exceeds what is required for a holding of this size. In other words, the vast majority of this grain is imported. It's not actually grown at Balraney. The construction of this new building will more than double the capacity of what is clearly an industrial business. If approved, the use of this development will create a concerning precedent, and the farm will become an industrial/business park in the future. The transport statement suggests that this development will reduce vehicle movements, which is hard to believe. The recent vehicle count was taken over a short period of time prior to the peak harvest period, bringing its accuracy into doubt. The construction of a second large building of a scale inappropriate to its surroundings will further reduce the very high amenity of the local landscape. This application has generated a high number of objections and representations from local residents, farmers, and community councils, highlighting the strength of feeling against it. I therefore respectfully urge the councillors to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McGregor. If you'd just like to take your seat. Oh, sorry, Mr McGregor, if you could wait a moment, because councillors may have some questions to ask you.
Of course.
Do elected members have any questions for Mr Craigie-Burton at this point? I can't see anybody online. So, sorry, Mr Craigie, you can now take your seat again. Thank you very much. Our second speaker is Mr Patrick Ford. Mr Ford, same applies to yourself. Again, I appreciate you've written an article doing both, but I'd prefer if you could refer to this one application at the moment, if you can. And again, I'll give you 5 minutes, and I'll remind you when you've got a minute left to go.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, before I say anything at all, other than that, I'm Patrick Ford from Tigerton Menmuir, about 2 miles from Balraney. Can I raise a preliminary issue, which is actually procedural, and I would like this not to be counted to my 5 minutes, because it's intended to be helpful to the committee and actually also to the applicants. And I'll tell you what it is, provided the clock isn't running, otherwise I'll forget it.
It is running, and
right.
I say, I hear what you're saying. If you wish to take 10 minutes to do your whole...
No, this is a preliminary point. It's a procedural point, which I only spotted while preparing for this, but it's not part of my objection. It is something I think should be clarified for the benefit of the committee and actually for the benefit of the applicants as well. So I'm raising it now because this is the beginning, and then I'll get on to my actual objection on the substance.
Give me 1 second, please. No, I'm afraid, Mr Ford, as far as I'm concerned, from its convener, it's a representation you're here to give today. That is all.
Right.
So, as I say, if you want to keep to your prepared notes and speak for the full 10 minutes, I'm prepared for that. Rather than do it 5 and 5 on each one. But that's all I'm prepared to go to. So, if you want to go ahead and actually start to present, I'm happy to do that. You'll be given 10 minutes to do the whole article, but that will cover 6 and 7.
Well, that's very kind of you to do that, but I'm leaving in the air, therefore, something that I think is very important.
I'm sorry, Mr Ford. That's what I've said. I've decided on it.
Yeah,
you're here
okay,
to give a representation.
Well,
just please go ahead with it now.
May
please.
Invalidate the application. That's all.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll forget that and just say, but thank you very much for allowing me to now speak for 10 minutes. Which I will do, and it's in support of my own objection and of the objections of others as well. And remember, there are people who are against the applications who have not put in formal responses, and I'm supporting their objections as well, their informal objections as well. My basic message is that the scale and nature of the grain drying and storage operation at Balraney are not appropriate for the location. So these two associated planning proposals are not in accordance with the development plan. So I call them the Shed 2 proposal, the one that you've seen on your screen, and the grain dryer proposal, also shown on the screen. Now, my basic message is that these are, in fact, they are part of an industrial operation. And the perspective I can give you on that, which I don't think actually appears in the reports, is that if you look on Scott Grain's website, you'll see that Balrownie is one of 7 locations throughout Scotland offering storage services and grain drying services. So I think Scott Grain is one of the primary movers of grain in UK, so it's a very big operation. It's one of the largest grain buyers in Scotland, and it works in partnership with Baird's Malt, which is actually its parent company. So the picture that emerges is this is really not just a diversification on a small farm, a 500-acre farm, but part of a very large grain processing operation, the kind of operation that should actually be on an industrial estate, just as the other similar operation, which Baird's Malt and Scott Grain have in Angus, is in Arbroath at the Elliott Industrial Estate. And that is an appropriate sort of place for this kind of operation. And all of this is consistent with the very large tonnage of grain which is processed at Balrownie, the 29,000 tonnes that appear in the paper. It's also consistent with the 20-mile radius that we heard of, which must coincide with Scott Grain's catchment area for the fertile land of Angus and the Mearns. So I think this explains the request for further capacity at Balrownie, further grain storing capacity, which would bring it up to about 35,000 tonnes, which, if you look at the Savills particulars, which are available on the website, on the internet, for when the farm was sold to the applicants, the 35,000 tonnes is about 5 times more than the grain drying and storage capacity that existed then for what was already a commercial grain drying operation. So this is a very, very big operation. I think you've got to, that is what I want to get across to you. Now, taking the, and generated as part of that is this enormous weight of HGV traffic. And I must say, we as objectors are amazed that the transport statement has been allowed to be so unrigorous. It takes a very brief spotlight on a short period of time, whereas over 6 months of the year, well, from February through to October, rather more than 6 months, that impact is felt throughout the year. So we did press for a traffic assessment rather than a traffic statement, and we're very disappointed that we haven't had that, because that would give a much truer picture of the weight of traffic and the impact on the area. And I can say that most of us who've objected, we've lived in the area for a very long time. We know what ordinary agricultural and forestry traffic is like, and this is of a completely different order. And really, these Carnarvon lorries have become a kind of dread in the area. And the area includes Dovewells Drive in Brechin, and you may know that there's been a Facebook campaign there against these lorries. So, it's a very, very important part of the spin-off, the harmful spin-off of this operation, which, again, could be avoided by reciting it elsewhere on an industrial estate. Right, well, I'll move to Shed 2 and just talk about the visual impact. I would very much like to feel that some of you on the committee, if not all of you, had actually been out to Balrownie and looked at Shed 1, which is already there. If you look at it in the slides that we did, it looks really quite small. It isn't. It is absolutely enormous. It's a monster. It's far bigger than anything else in the area. You see that if you just drive past. The second shed would be closer to the road, bigger, screened, but hardly effectively by some new trees. So I'm disappointed to feel, I would be disappointed if I thought nobody had been out there to actually look yourselves, because you would see what we're talking about when you see that. So that's the visual impact. And remember, this road is an access to the Catathons, one of the most popular sites, tourist sites and visitor site, local people in Brechin too. They will all see this great industrial estate developing if this second shed is allowed. We're concerned as objectors that this shed will in due course come to be used in connection with this industrial enterprise. And yes, there is a sort of rationalisation programme which has been mentioned in the transport statement. But remember, it's not binding. Things can change in the future. Perhaps the enterprise would still have outlying storage sheds, or the current ones would be closed down, others opened up. Once the shed is there, it's there, and can be used for any Class 6 storage use. So the way not to allow this enterprise to expand even further than it has already would be to say no to this second shed. So remember, as I say, the transport, I'm sure it's given in good faith, this rationalisation programme, but it is not binding, and in the future the shed and other sheds in the area may still be put to use in connection with the whole programme. And the fear there is that there will be yet further HGV traffic, which I've highlighted as being a major concern in the area. Well, on to the grain dryer. Am I doing on time?
You actually have exactly 2 minutes left.
That's super. Thank you very much, Mr. Convener. And if I've got time left, I will mention the thing that I wanted to mention as a favour. The grain dryer. Well, the grain dryer is at the heart of this whole operation. It shouldn't be there. Should have had planning permission applied for before it went up. That deprived stakeholders in the area and elsewhere of the opportunity to object before it went up, so the applicant should not receive any benefit from having got facts on the ground. It would be quite the wrong message to put out to developers that all you've got to do is build something and then apply for retrospective planning permission. So I'm not saying that has happened here, that they are gaining an advantage, but in fact what we see is the ill effects of having an industrial operation there. It is not just a replacement grain dryer, it is an industrial level grain dryer, far larger and capable of getting through a far higher tonnage, as we see already, 29,000 per annum. So the grain dryer is at the heart of the problem of the HGV difficulties that we're talking about in the area, which include the aspect of road safety. Yes, it's great that there haven't been any accidents in the Memure area or the Balrownie area for the last 5 years. Let's hope that will continue. But if there is an increase in traffic, we're tempting fate, I'm afraid. These are vast lorries, 29 ton, and as I said, they have created dread in the area, including Dovewell's Drive in Brechin.
Mr. Ford, can you start to conclude, please? Now, I'll give you another few seconds.
Right. Well, I'll use my 2 seconds to say that the application has, well, both applications have been made in the name of Balrownie Farms Limited. If you look on the company register, you will find that Balrownie Farms Limited has been dissolved. So it's apparently, it seems that, there may be a simple explanation. It seems that these applications have been made in the name of a non-existent entity. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Just want to remain seated just in case there are any questions from elected members. Any in the chamber? And there doesn't appear to be from any of our online members today. Okay, Mr Ford, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Chair.
Okay. Okay, so the applicant is actually online today. Mr Carnegie is with us online, and his representatives of his consultants are here, I believe, to take any questions from elected members. So I think initially we'll start off with, I think they only want to answer questions. They're not making a presentation. So do any members have any questions for the applicant or for the representatives? Councillor Duff.
I guess I have two questions. One, I think probably both covered by the statement made by the second objector, just to confirm my understanding. The grain dryer is not a new entity, but is a replacement for a redundant piece of equipment. That's my first question. And the second question is, in paragraph 715 of the report, it clearly states that grain for this facility comes from a 20-mile radius. So the capacity of the existing farm is kind of irrelevant, because it was used as a central point for grain that was grown in an area by the applicant. So I guess that, just to confirm that my understanding of that is correct.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. Would either the consultants or would Mr Carnegie wish to speak to this? Perhaps if you could introduce yourself before you speak. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Payton from Crawford Architecture, representing Mr Carnegie. Councillor Duff, just in response to your query regarding the grain dryer, that is indeed a new element and a replacement element. And the current grain dryer that was on Balrownie site, which was much smaller and much more energy heavy, has now been mothballed, just to confirm. In response to your other query, can you just confirm what that was again, just for...
Sorry, apologies for that. 5 of the report does indicate that the grain for the facility is going to come from a 20-mile radius. So that's the status quo effectively, and there's no suggestion that the grain is only coming from the farm of Balrownie. It has been used as a central point for some time, and that's not going to change.
Yeah, that is a correct statement. Yeah.
Any other questions from members in the chamber? Okay, I think... okay, Councillor Beattie, you go first before me.
Sorry. Thanks, Convener. The point made by the second objector about the applicant and it being a dissolved company, is that something that we should be concerned about? Nope. Okay.
Ms Taylor will speak first to this.
So it has absolutely no bearing on the land use plan and merits of what we're considering.
Okay. I'll take that as read. Okay. Was that your only question, Councillor Beattie? Yeah. I think microphone's on, sorry. Mr Carnegie, if I could maybe reach out to yourself. I know you're online. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I mean, between yourself and actually the consultants, I have 1 or 2 points I just want to raise for clarity as well with all of this. Just, I mean, these are quite detailed papers that are given, and for the benefit of objectors, I read every single one of these before this meeting, as elected members will do. The tonnage of the new store is to be about 18,000 tonnes, as I understand it. 12,000 tonnes currently is transported into the farm for drying and then transported out initially to Pert, 2 sites, one at Pert and one at Stracathro, and that's correct, is it?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so that 12,000 tonnes, by building this and operating this would no longer require the journey. It would still require the journey in to your site for drying, apologies, which is already happening at the moment anyway, but would remain there and be transported direct to Arbroath. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so of the 18,000 tonnes, 12,000 would be the tonnage that's currently being double journeyed, if you like, initially to Stracathro and Pert, and then on from there again to Arbroath. The remaining capacity of the building, what's your intent for that?
Our main intent for that just now is to future-proof our agricultural business going forward. And we are looking at possibly growing our own potatoes and vegetables in the future. So it's to give us some spare capacity because we have no capacity left at this moment in time.
Right, so it would be primarily used for your own agricultural purposes, grown on your own farm and stored in there?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Fine, actually, I think that covers the questions that I had on this. Thank you. So if there's no other... sorry, Councillor Melville, apologies.
Yes, thanks, Convener. It's just one of the points that was raised in the second objection around the difference between a transport statement and a transport assessment. So I wonder if the officers could just narrate why a statement was sufficient rather than an assessment.
Worthy question, Mr. Taylor.
So the Angus Local Development Plan has triggers. So I'll go back a bit. A transport statement is a less comprehensive document of production than a full transport assessment, which would consider all junction. Perhaps my colleague in road should be answering this, but step in, please, if I say anything out of turn. It's a more comprehensive assessment. It will consider things like all junctions in surrounding area and road network capacity. And our local development plan has a number of triggers in it where we would look for something like that to be produced, and it might be something like a new industrial estate or a new supermarket or something really significant in terms of traffic generating uses. But there are triggers in our local development plan, and this is well, there's no trigger associated with agricultural development, but even the trigger associated with industrial development is significantly greater than the scale of the building that we're looking at today. Hopefully that covers it.
Mr. Barnes, could you want to add anything to that?
I think I would just add that a transport assessment would also look at the more accessibility, public transport, all other routes to the site, whereas really we're just concentrated on HGV movements. So the transport statement that has been submitted is acceptable to the road service.
Thanks, Mr. Barnes. That's noted. Can I just add one question to the consultants in that case? Did you take any cognizance of any of that on the transport and traffic? There have been some comments and objections regarding the width of roads, the strength of local bridges and things. I want to know whether you've taken any cognizance of that in your application.
I'm going to pass that over to Mark Peters, who's the consultant from the engineers.
Good morning. So the report that we prepared of comments that had been passed to Ed, I think, as he'd got in touch with us, got in touch with the applicant and put quite a detailed kind of scope back to us in terms of say this is what the queries have been to go and look at. So we went away and prepared a scope for that. Undertook that at a time where it was actually a very busy period of the harvest, because it was the last week, it was the week end of August, beginning of September. So I think I would just want to clarify that the surveys that we did do were during sort of peak sort of harvest time. And just to kind of pick up a little bit there in terms of the transport statement, transport assessment. So as correctly said there, obviously that the transport assessment picks up a lot more in the sort of accessibility, sort of walking, cycling, public transport, and also sort of traffic impact. But in this case, whilst we did do the transport statement, we did focus it on on the sort of HGV movements, and we did do traffic surveys, and we undertook a number of traffic counts on the local roads and analysed that. So it was considered to pick up on the points that have been sort of raised in the objections, and to give planning and roads the information that they would need to consider the application.
Okay, thank you for thanking me on that one. Mr. Knight, can I just come back to you, if you're still there? Just another question just came to mind when we were speaking about that just now, and taking one of the points, one of the objectives, although it is very subjective. The storage at Stracathro and Pert, would you have any continued interest in any of that going forward?
No, we wouldn't have any interest in that going forward, because that's currently rented.
Sorry, I didn't quite make out what you said at the end.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, did you say it was rented?
Yes, that's correct. So we would have no interest in that going forward.
Okay, so do I take from that that the tonnage that would be coming into this warehouse would be the maximum amount that you would be processing going forward?
That is correct.
Thank you. Again, just on the back of that, any other questions from elected members? No? In that case, we'll move to comments from members. Do any members have any comments on this application? Councillor Duff, please.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, I mean, I'm noting the large number of objections. They sort of fall into two baskets, if you like: the transport argument and the it's pretty ugly argument. It's an industrial scale agriculture, and I kind of feel that that's the way that agriculture is now. I mean, it is. We've got larger farms, larger units. We no longer have 3-ton lorries going around carrying goods. They're much larger lorries, and we're not going to turn the clock back to what was done 30, 40 years ago. But agriculture is an important industry within Angus. We want to support agriculture. We want to support rural businesses. That MPF4 supports that. And, farms are bigger, and they have consolidated, and there's an element of efficiency about this new facility. We've heard from Mr Taylor and Rhodes that effectively the HGV movements are not going to be any greater. And, I think farm buildings are larger. We've had applications recently for solar farms, and the same argument has been used. This is industrialising the landscape. But look, we need to eat and we need to produce food, and that's how it's done. So for me, I think the report's very comprehensive, and I'm certainly quite happy to support it. The application, in fact, both applications. We'll do one at a time, I guess. But, yeah.
Yes, we're going to be voting on application for agenda item 6 first. Councillor Doran.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment as well to say that, as noted, that I've read through all of the papers issued and all of the letters that have been sent in regarding these two applications, and I feel happy that the questions have been answered by both in the report and through the discussion that we've had today.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Doran. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener. And just like my colleagues have indeed read quite a lot and listened, and in particular, I always give great cognizance when people, especially community councils, which are statutory bodies, and everybody that lives around there, who gave very eloquent and involved comment. But I have to make the comment myself that sustainability was mentioned earlier on. Now, farm and land, like every other business, but especially them, really have to be sustainable. And for me, this is not even an unbalanced judgment for me. It's quite clear. So I would say I'll be supporting that. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, no other comments from other elected members. From my own point of view, I'm an accountant, just for people who know, and I was busily trying to work out, we're looking at tonnage and vehicle movements to try and work out, to prove all of this, but in the end it actually becomes slightly irrelevant in the knowledge that the grain that is coming in to the site, the volume, in a sense, won't actually change going in, and in fact it will be simply stored there and then be one journey to Arbroath rather than two journeys to Arbroath. Certainly, I worked out that to be at least 414 journeys less because of that. So from the car view, it makes complete sense as well. So I think from a traffic point of view, I'm satisfied from the traffic side of things. So it comes down for me to more the visual side of this development and its placement as far as I'm concerned. I'm conscious back in 2019 that Shed 1, as it's been referred to, was debated and approved already through planning. This is similar, although I acknowledge the fact it's a third larger than the previous one. But I do believe that this contributes to an existing rural business and an existing infrastructure in the area. So on the back of all of that, I'm going to move approval of this application. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Duff, thank you. And is anyone
I'm happy to second it.
So, thank you, Councillor Duff. Is anyone wishing to bring an amendment to that? No. In that case, a planning application 22/00807 is hereby approved. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which is planning application 23/00300. Now, this is for the replacement grain dryer. And again, the only speaker in relation to this one was Mr. Ford. We've already had the presentation from Mr. Taylor on this one, which along with agenda item 6. So what I'm going to ask here is simply, do elected members have any residual questions on the back of everything we've heard so far on this item on the grain dryer? Councillor Beattie, yeah?
Thanks, Convener. The only question is, why did this end up a retrospective planning application and not just an ordinary planning application?
Mr. Taylor?
I'm not sure I'm in the best place to answer that. We've asked the applicant that, and I think from the agent's perspective, that from their perspective, they had understood that an application was to be submitted by a different agent, but obviously it's not the planning service that installs things. The report confirms it was installed in 2021, so at a similar time that the shed was constructed. I can only suggest that you ask the applicant that question.
Yeah, we will, because I think that's part of this as well. But that was really questions for the council officer. But we have the opportunity to ask on this planning application to question the applicant and also the consultants involved here. But I think the applicant's more appropriate. Mr. Carnegie, could you answer that one? This committee is never very happy about retrospective planning applications. This in 2019, when the previous application was approved, the grain dryer wasn't on that. How did it happen to be there?
Apologies that happened. I appointed Scott Steel as the main contractor, and they did the planning application with an architect in Dundee. The company that did the grain dryer was a company called Graintech, who liaised with Scott Steel, who were to do the planning application. I was copied into emails showing the maps, the drawings and everything that were to be submitted to planning, showing the grain dryer. And it then came to light that, in fact, when they did the application, they didn't include the grain dryer. When I questioned the owner of Scott Steel, he said the grain dryer was covered under ancillary equipment because it was shed and ancillary equipment. So apologies to my naivety to the matter, and that is why for this application we've went independent and appointed an architect to do the planning for us to make sure that there was no confusion going forward. And again, my apologies that this has happened in the first place.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Again, on the back of what Mr. Carnegie said, any further questions from members here or online? No. We are where we are. 2019 application went through as it is, but I do acknowledge to objectors that they weren't previously given the opportunity to object to this in 2019. However, they were on this occasion, and we've heard from that and seen their comments on this. So after questions, can I just then move to comments from elected members on this planning application? Are there any comments? No. Okay. Okay. From my own point of view, summing up on this one, you've heard my thoughts on this. I don't like retrospective applications. In this case, however, it is, I do believe, auxiliary to the building, but it goes along with the actual business that's required involved here. It has been there for the last couple of years, and it's integral to the actual business. And we've seen from the diagrams as well that it is largely hidden, other than the top of it. So again, similarly here, I acknowledge the rural side of this business, and this is what you expect to see in many places. So again, on this one, I am going to move approval of planning application 23-00300. Again, do I have a seconder? Councillor Clark, thank you very much. And again, any opportunity for any amendment to the applications? No? Okay, thank you. Planning application 23-00300 full is hereby approved. Thank you very much. Members,
Just have a second to get the other elected members back.
Of course, yeah. Members of the public can either remain for the remaining item or they can leave if they wish to.
John, could you just stop the live stream a second, please?
Okay, we can welcome back our elected members who left for the last two items. We have one more item on the agenda this morning. Agenda item 8 relates to planning application 23-00560/full. It's submitted by Carnoustie Dental Care for the erection of a single-storey extension to a dental practice, along with associated internal and external alterations at 18 Dundee Street, Carnoustie. Ms. Porter, I'll let you present the slides on this one, if I can.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, everyone. We'll just wait till the slides on the screen catch up with what's on my screen. It should be in full mode. again. Here we go. So as the convener suggested, this is item 8 on the agenda for today. It's the application seeking full planning permission for the erection of a single-storey extension to the dental practice with other associated alterations at 18 Dundee Street in Carnoustie. So this slide in front of you, that's the location plan submitted alongside the application. The application site is outlined in the centre in red. As you can see, the existing building is located in the middle of that red line site, located in a terrace row with residential properties either side. There's a yard area to the rear and an open aspect to the front that fronts onto Dundee Street, which is the main route through Carnoustie. There's also commercial premises located either side of the residential row. We have a vet and a chemist on the east-hand side here, and other commercial properties, including a hairdresser and an off-licence to the west over here. The town centre boundary for Carnoustie is just out with this drawing. The boundary runs down the east-hand side of the War Memorial and cuts along Dundee Street and heads down Ferrier Street here. So these images on the screen in front of you, they show some photos of the rear of the property and the principal elevation of the property. The rear-hand image, the image on the left-hand side is the rear of the property. As you can see, the area is characterised by high stone walls, various rear extensions and alterations to the buildings, and various rear curtilage structures. The image on the right-hand side shows the front of the property, and as you can see, low stone walls, low boundary treatments, and open expanses fronting onto the main public road. The slide on the screen now shows the proposed site plan. The existing building is indicated by the grey outlines, and as you can see, there's an existing single-storey rear extension which was approved in 1997. It's indicated by this area here. The proposed extension is 17 square metres, single-storey, and that's indicated by the yellow outlined space here. So this projects beyond the existing single-storey rear extension. There's also a small glass roof infill proposed, which is indicated here where my cursor is. And that's located between the existing rear extension and the original building. So the development would provide for a fourth surgery and improved patient and staff facilities. The principle of extending the long-established dental practice in this location on a main route in close proximity to the Carnoustie Town Centre is generally compliant with relevant development plan policies. In terms of relevant planning history, it's also important to highlight that in addition to the approved single-storey rear extension that's existing and the first floor extensions which provide additional accommodation on the first floor level, there was also a ground floor rear extension refused at committee in 2008. That previous extension is illustrated by the slide in front of you. The proposal is indicated by the yellow lines, and as you can see, that previous extension occupied the full width of the rear curtilage area and almost all of the rear yard. The only area that remained undeveloped was this area here where the bins are located. That extension measured roughly 32 square metres compared to the current proposal, which is seeking 17 square metre increase. That application was refused because it was deemed to have a significant adverse effect on the character and amenity of neighbouring properties. Returning back to the current proposal, this slide shows the floor plans of the development. Again, the main extension in a bit more detail indicating the new surgery space is here. As you can see, the existing air conditioning unit has been relocated from the rear elevation to the east elevation, and the infill extension is here. And as you can see from the roof plan on the first floor plan, where it's the roof plan of the ground floor extension, the infill is fully glazed in its roof. The internal alterations which are proposed would not require planning permission. So the current proposal is materially different to the previously refused proposal, as this current application doesn't seek to develop almost the full rear curtilage and doesn't extend the full width of the rear curtilage. This slide here shows the front elevation of the property, which is indicated by the label south elevation. There's no changes proposed to this elevation. Just to clarify, the property is not a listed building and it's not located in the conservation area. The north elevation indicates the rear elevation of the proposal, which includes a window facing onto the public road to the north. And the west elevation is indicated here, where the extension is the slightly lighter grey area, and the infill extension has the more flat roof here. The rear extension continues the form of the existing single-storey extension and will be finished in materials to match this. The image on the bottom right-hand corner gives you a context of the surrounding area. It shows that there's somewhat of a design uniformity along the terrace, but there are a variety of extensions and rear curtilage structures, some of which are hard up against the public road to the rear. And it also illustrates the wide range of building styles that are located to the west in Simpson Place. The main extension would not be incongruent in the streetscape, and the smaller infill extension would have no material impact on the appearance of the wider area. This slide here shows the east elevation, as in section A. As you can see, the photos on the right-hand side, the top image shows the view of the existing east elevation. As you can see, there are various extensions to the neighbouring property and various in curtilage structures. And the bottom image just shows the current relationship between the existing rear extension and the neighbouring property to the east. The cross section here, that's a view as viewed from the west, and as you can see, the windows proposed on this elevation are higher level above head height, so roof lights and high level glazed windows here. So 6 letters of objection have been received from surrounding properties, and the main planning concerns raised relate to the previous refusal for an extension in a similar location. However, as discussed, that extension was larger than the one currently proposed, and it was also considered against different local plan policies and therefore has limited relevance in consideration of this case. Concerns regarding the scale and design of the proposal and it being out of character with the residential area have also been raised, and again, as discussed, the scale and design of the proposal is considered to be compliant with policies and guidance. Other concerns raised relate to the potential for an increase in general and clinical waste and parking. This image here illustrates the existing residential waste situation and parking provision on Balfour Place, where officers visited the site. The application property is the one with the pitched roof projection just adjacent to the grey car here. In terms of waste storage, there's considered to be sufficient space remaining within the site to accommodate this, and also a condition is proposed to secure a waste management scheme. The application has also been discussed with the Council's waste service team, who have indicated no objection to the proposal. In considering parking in a bit more detail, this aerial imagery, the application property is indicated by the blue arrow here. This illustrates a slightly different situation to that was illustrated in the previous photo. As you can see, Balfour Place to the north is almost empty in this image. Furthermore, there's a public car park located a short distance to the west on the corner of Links Avenue, here just on the left-hand side of this image. There's time-restricted on-street parking available in front of the property on Dundee Street, just where these cars are located here. There's also another public car park located in the bottom right-hand corner of the image. I think it's off Park Avenue, just down here. And there are also various other opportunities for on-street unrestricted parking in surrounding streets. The proposal is also located in close proximity to the town centre and its associated public transport links, and the road service have considered the proposal and offer no objection in terms of impact on traffic or pedestrian safety and matters of parking. Concerns were also raised regarding the privacy and amenity of surrounding properties, including sunlight restrictions. These images here again were taken from Balfour Place. They show the rear elevation on the left-hand side and somewhat of the west elevation on the right-hand side. In terms of overlooking, most of the proposed windows are high level and the remaining windows do not give rise to any significant conflict with relevant guidance in terms of window-to-window distances. In terms of availability of light, the main extension which provides for the new surgery space is 6.5 metres from the real elevation of neighbouring dwellings and are located no closer to existing elevations. The smaller infill extension on the west boundary is of a limited height and it has a transparent roof and windows located at the wall head. This would allow for a degree of light to pass through, and the impact of light on neighbouring windows is unlikely to be materially different to those currently experienced. The development is closer to shared boundaries and therefore has the potential to impact on the availability of sunlight to neighbouring garden areas, but this was considered against accepted council methodology which is used to assess such impacts on garden ground, and in this instance the proposal complies. It is accepted that the proposal would result in some additional impacts on neighbouring properties, but the development relates to a long-established dental practice, which by virtue of their nature, dental practices do not typically give rise to significant amenity impacts and are commonly found in residential areas. And in this case, the practice is located on a main thoroughfare near the town centre where there is already significant movement and activity. Furthermore, Environmental Health have advised that they are not aware of any complaints made regarding the existing operation, and they offer no objection to the proposal subject to a condition to regulate noise from fixed plant. The amenity impacts associated with the development are not considered to be unacceptable in the context of relevant policy and guidance and when having regard to the nature of existing impacts. Therefore, just turning back to the site plan here, so the proposal would provide for improved dental care facilities associated with a long-established business serving a growing community. As with any development, the proposal is likely to result in some impact and change to the amenity of surrounding properties, but the site is in an accessible edge of town centre location where development plan policy is generally supportive of this type of development. Impacts associated with the proposal upon matters such as amenity, the built and natural environment, road safety and infrastructure are not considered unacceptable having regard to council policy and guidance. There are no material considerations, including relevant planning history or matters raised in representation to the proposal, that justify refusal of the application. Therefore, the development is recommended for approval subject to the conditions listed in the report before members.
Okay, thanks, Ms Porter, on that one. Can I ask if any members have any questions of Ms Porter? Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thanks. This may actually be for Mr Barnes, if that's all right. It's in relation to the parking, because it's something that has come up again and again and again in all of the objections. I mean, I won't read them out, but you know, in every single one, parking is a problem and things like that. So I just wonder, when you offer no object to this, what assessment have you made of the impact of an additional surgery on parking provision? And just if you could just narrate that just for the public record, thanks.
So the impact of one surgery is didn't work. Yeah, so the impact of one additional surgery is not very significant. There are on-street spaces directly in front of the property. Is limited to 1 hour, and there are unrestricted spaces as well. So overall, it's an insignificant application in terms of parking for the road service.
Very short. The images that we've seen regarding parking, the close-up ones, have largely been in Balfour Place, which obviously is at the rear. I take it that most patients will go in through the front entrance rather than having to park on Balfour Place and going in the back door.
I couldn't comment for how they would approach, but obviously there are the on-street parking spaces property, which are, like as Andy suggested, time restricted, but there are parking spaces and car parks a short distance, and as you suggested, it's likely they probably will go in through the front door rather than the rear.
Yeah, just for information purposes only, the only access is through the front door for patients. Any other questions for, yeah, Councillor Beattie, please.
I'm not really sure if this question's for you guys or maybe even for the applicant, but yeah, paragraph 7.9, where sunlight seems to be an issue. Yeah. What you've got there is correct me if I'm wrong, an open gable roof. Would a hip-style roof not allow more light into the neighbouring properties?
So in terms of making an assessment on the garden areas, you take a measurement up to a certain height and you draw a 45-degree angle, and it currently complies. So changing it wouldn't make much of a significant difference to the impacts that we've assessed.
On that, might make a difference to the neighbours. So.
As it's proposed at the moment, it does comply. So it could have been something that was suggested to the applicant as part of the application process, but we've assessed what's been proposed and what's in front of us, and as I said, it does comply with the guidance. So we've not raised any concerns with that.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener. I suppose in some respects I'll go along a similar route, but a different route, if you see what I mean. Because what I'm trying to say here is, I spent about 10 years working for a dentist, so I've got some information that backs up what I'm trying to say here. There is a lot of noise, and if windows are open, etc., there's a lot of noise. So there's a lot of noise which has been mentioned here, and I'm not sure what you're going to tell me about that, if that can be mitigated, which I'm sure it can, especially in the summertime when they will have to open windows. And that in itself as well speaks to, it does matter insofar as patient confidentiality as well. But alongside that, I really can see the absolute need for a dental practice. But I just wondered if that's something you could comment on, please.
Yeah, so I think the report, there will be an increase in impact. However, it's not judged to be of a level that would be unacceptable, and as is suggested in the report, the environmental health colleagues have considered impacts on amenity and haven't raised any concerns. They have obviously suggested the condition to mitigate noise levels from fixed plant, which would apply to the air conditioning unit which is being relocated. In terms of impacts on privacy, patient confidentiality, that's not directly a planning consideration. However, it's reasonable to suggest that the extension in itself wouldn't have an impact on these matters.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Any questions at the moment? No? Okay, I can move immediately to elected member comments. Councillor Melville first, please.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I've read all the objections. I have had my questions around parking and access answered, and I'm satisfied by that. And so for me, this is fairly straightforward. There are issues with dentistry in South Angus, so I do think we need to be supporting local NHS dentistry and keeping NHS dentistry local. I think that's particularly important. I do appreciate the concerns of the objectors, but as I've said, I'm fairly satisfied with how my questions have been answered. So given that this will improve local access to NHS dentistry and sort of tackle some of the waiting lines, and that there are no objections from statutory bodies, I'm perfectly happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Melville. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And like my colleagues again, read these papers and look at all the objectors and everything else and be very careful about how you come to your decision. But I already mentioned my background in dentistry, that things are not getting any better. And I suppose for me, it might not be a mitigating circumstance, but for me, I've done everything I can here, and duty of care now comes into this for me. And I want to wish them well. And it's not a new venture, but something that will help. We have got issues with dental care for people, and we have to do something about that. Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the huge pressures on the dental profession at the moment, and you know there's an increasingly shortage of dentists and NHS dentists, so we certainly don't want to lose one. In terms of location, I'm thinking where the dentists are in Montrose, and at least 2 of the dentists are in what you would call a residential area. One of them is in a street with 1 hour parking, so it's quite similar. So I think that's the way dental practices have developed. That wasn't uncommon, I would think. They are not necessarily town centre things. So I think if you were designing Carnoustie from scratch, that wouldn't be a place you would put a dentist. But I think these things have developed over 50, 60 years. And I think if a business that's well established wants to expand and it can do that sensibly, then I think we have to take note of the comments in the report and accept the application. I know there's objections. I don't think, I think Mr Barnes has basically sort of shot the argument about parking being a real issue. There's plenty of available parking. It's only one additional surgery, so I would be happy to accept it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify a point for members in relation to the comments raised that the matter of whether it's an NHS or a private practice is not a planning matter, so it is the principle of a use, but just for future reference.
Okay, thanks, Ms Patterson. Are there any other comments online? Oh, Councillor Dorn, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, and I support that we do need to expand our dental services and access to dentists in the area. I know there's a huge demand for that, but that doesn't mean that obviously they can build whatever they wish to in order to accommodate those practices. But for me, the questions have been answered and the assessments from officers is acceptable to me. I also wanted to mention, because although we talk about parking a lot, I always consider when we're thinking about any planning applications, particularly for anything that's commercial, what's the kind of long-term look at this in terms of the context of cars and public transport? And this is actually located really closely to an existing bus service that's serving that area. So I would hope to see that maybe the dental practice encourages people to attend by bus rather than only by car. I know that sometimes that is not practical when you're going to a dental appointment, but sometimes it also is. So for me, yeah, all the questions have been answered. And just to say, I'm cognizant of the objections that have been raised with this. It is difficult. But I think the officers have clarified all of the status regarding those. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dorn, thank you for that. I can't see any other hands up for any other comments. Okay, a bit of summing up, I think, on this one. As I said at the outset, I'm familiar, clearly being a Christie councillor as well. The issue on parking, Balfour Place in particular, is always busy regardless, but it tends not to be dental patients, it's residents. You can see there are about 24 properties along that Balfour Place with only one small stretch, so it's always a bit of a battle to get parked there, but it really isn't relevant to the... I think regarding... I was going to query the sunlight question that Councillor Mill brought up, or Councillor B brought up, but I think that's been answered already. Regarding, there is a condition here regarding the noise of plant. I note that there's been no previous complaint at all to environmental health, and yeah, and also there's no reason that appropriate waste management can't be put in place. That one also, I'm conscious that the increase in provision of healthcare should be supported in line with policy 23 of NPF4 as well. So on all that basis, and knowing the site as I do, I'm going to move that planning application is approved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Melville, thank you. And any other amendment to that? No. Thank you. So, okay, planning application number 23/00560/full is hereby approved. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, today for your assistance and comments and things, and we'll wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, convener.
Can we start the live stream, please?